So I'd like to call to order the school committee meeting of October 8th, 2014. All members are present except for Peggy Kane. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of items by consensus. Superintendent-elect.
Yes, there are 3 items for consideration on the consent agenda this evening. They include the minutes of the September 24th, 2014 regular session, as well as warrants L07, L08, L09, and payroll warrant 924, 2014.
Okay, so for the approval of minutes, September 24th, 2014 regular session, can I have a motion to approve? Mrs. Broussard?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 24th, 2014.
Can I have a second? Mrs. Carroll? All in favor? Unanimous. Oh,
Abstain.
abstain, Mrs. Burns.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, okay. So it's 4 and 2. 4 in favor, 2 abstain. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the warrants L07, L08, and L09? Mrs. Broussard?
I'll make a motion to approve warrants L07, L08, L09.
Can I have a second? Mr. Moulis? All in favor? Okay, unanimous, 6. And then can I have a motion to approve the warrants for payroll 9/24, 2014? Mr. Moulis?
I'll make a motion to approve the warrants for payroll 9/24, 2014.
Can I have a second? Mrs. Broussard? All in favor? Okay, 5 in favor, 1 abstain. Mrs. Carroll. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Oh, wait a minute, we forgot the student report. All right, so we have a student report today by Emma Sears and Stephen O'Brien.
So on the first academic quarter will end on October 30th, and the PSATs will be held at Wilmington High School on October 18th.
A performance of Mice and Men will be presented to the freshmen on October 9th. And Spirit Week is next week, October 14th to October 17th. Starting Tuesday, we'll be having Sports Day, Decade Day, Costume Day, and Blue and White Day.
Any questions, comments? What is Decade Day?
Students will get to choose which decade is their favorite to dress up from.
Oh, that's fun. Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to there's a few items that I just want to inform the committee about prior to the 3 that are listed here. First of all, we were asked to, actually, Mrs. Bonish was asked to pull the ticket for the winner of the Strings Attached Parents Group Raffle. The prize, had I only known, is a weekend for 2 to Paris, all expenses paid, over Martin Luther King weekend. And the winner, we're announcing here to the public, was the Melvin family of Towpath Drive in Wilmington. And I believe that the Strings Attached folks will be in touch with the Melvins to let them know the good news of their prize.
Good for them. It's around the corner from me.
The other, another item I wanted to bring to your attention is that we had 4 students from Wilmington High School who were named commended students in the 2015 National Merit Scholarship Program. Daniel Bell, Kevin Dunn, Carolyn Johnston, and Jacob Vieira. The commended students placed among the top 5% of more than 1.5 million students who entered the 2015 competition. So that's really great news for our students. You have in front of you, I passed out at the beginning of the meeting, a couple of items. There is a ceremony for the dedication of a bench that was placed at the Boutwell School in honor of retired Principal Bob Apolloni. And they're going to do that dedication ceremony on Friday, October 17th at 12:30 p.m. That's at the Boutwell School Playground, so feel free to attend. Unfortunately for me, this conflicts with my trip with the 8th grade students to New York City, so I won't be in attendance, but it would be great to have folks from the school committee that are able to attend be there. And finally, I also included, for your information, some information about the time capsule that the high school is putting together for the new, to be placed in the principal's office, actually behind the wall in the principal's office, in the new high school building. So if the committee wants to put their heads together and has any ideas for things that they would like to put into the time capsule, here are some guidelines for you to use in selecting that item, and they're putting that together. It will be installed, as I said, in a wall behind the principal's office, but there will be a plaque there so that the folks in the future know exactly where that time capsule was placed. And unless there's any questions, I'll move on to the next item. Next two items, the FY14 revolving account report and the FY14 financial report. I will turn that over to Mr. Ruggiero, who will be giving those reports.
Thank you. The first report is the end of the year, fiscal year 14 revolving account report, and shows all the expenditures, the starting balance, revenues received, expenditures, and ending balance. As you can see, each of the revolving accounts has a positive balance at the end of fiscal year 14. So they're in good shape. All the information has been reconciled with the town. So we're all set as far as that goes in the revolving account report. And on the financial report, again, this is the end of the year, fiscal year 2014 financial report, and we ended the year with a balance of, in the black, $322. So the budget that we had, we spent just about all of it appropriately. Again, this has been reconciled and delivered to the town, so it's a very good FY14 year.
Great. Does anyone have any questions?
Wonderful job, Paul, in balancing that.
Okay, all right. Moving on to the next item on the report is the 2014 MCAS results and accountability report, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Burnham, who's going to provide us with a presentation on that. We should probably slide out.
So what we'll cover on these slides this evening really is a reflection of the information that you received in the report in your packets for tonight's meeting. The report covers 3 different types of data. We're going to look at a summary of the performance data, growth data, and then look at PPI. When we're talking about performance data, we're talking about those categories of performance on the MCAS. Students score advanced or proficient, needs improvement, warning, or at the high school level it would be failing. So that just gives you a frame of reference for the data that we'll be talking about. So when we take a look, the only test where we don't have a combined percentage of proficient and advanced higher than 50% would be the grade 8 science test. I will say, though, and we'll get to it later, we did see some significant growth on this particular test this year, but we'll get more into that later. Between 50% and 74% combined proficient or advanced. In ELA, we saw grades 3 through 6, mathematics, grades 4 through 8, and the science, grade 5. And then where we saw results higher than 75% proficient or higher, we had the ELA for grades 7, 8, and 10, math grades 3 and 10, and our science grade 10. When we take a look at how many students are in the warning or failing category by grade, you can take a look and see that we do have more students at every grade level in the failing category in math as compared to ELA. But you can see by the time students reach grade 10, there are very few who remain in a warning or failing category. Taking a look at grade 3, side by side, the two schools, You can see that performance is fairly comparable for ELA, Shawsheen grade 3 to Woburn Street grade 3. And you can see when you look at the percentages of students in proficient and advanced side by side, Shawsheen and Woburn Street, we did see a good jump in math at Woburn Street this year. And we did see a significant shift in the number of students in the warning category at Woburn Street. You can see that that's down to 1%. Grade 4, side by side, North and West, very comparable performance in ELA, and a slightly better performance at the West for grade 4 in math. Grade 5, side by side, North and West, again, the ELA performance is fairly comparable. Slightly stronger performance at the West, grade 5 in math. You can see that the needs improvement percentage is lower, but the warning percentage is higher. So that's a focus for this year. Science, again, you can see fairly comparable, although the West does have a bit more of an edge there with the science. MCAS Alt, that's the portfolio assessment. These are the students that do not take the paper pencil MCAS test. These are students reported here, students in and out of district that participated in this portfolio assessment. We had 33 students in ELA, 32 in math, and 10 in science. And when you take a look at their performance, you can see that 7 students in ELA, 6 in math, and 1 in science scored an incomplete rating on their portfolio. 4 ELA, 3 math scored emerging in their portfolio. Most of our students perform in the progressing category, 21 ELA, 23 math, and then 1 in the needs improvement category in ELA. Now we'll move on to a peek at growth data. So one of the terms that we use when we talk about growth data is student growth percentile, or SGP. And that is determined based on the growth when compared to a student's academic peers. And their academic peers are defined as those students who have a very similar, or actually an exactly similar performance historically with their MCAS tests. So they're being compared against students who scored the same exact score that they did last year and the year before.
Is that statewide?
Statewide.
Okay.
So when you take a look and try to figure out, okay, so what's low growth and what's high growth, you can see that if you're looking at 0% to 100%, between 40 and up to, but not including 60, so 40 to 59, that's moderate growth. That's not bad. Anything 60 and above, that's high growth. And anything below 40 would be low growth. So when we take a look, combining performance data, where students performed in terms of those categories, proficient, advanced, needs improvement, and the growth percentile, we have basically 4 quadrants, if you will. You can be in the lower achievement, so not scoring advanced and proficient, and have higher growth, or you could be low achievement with lower growth, that's below the 40% growth. The red line represents that 50% mid-range. Above the 50% red line, you can see that students would be in the categories where they could be demonstrating higher achievement because they scored better than the 50%. But they might have low growth. They might be below that 40% on the growth. And obviously where we really want to see our students performing is in that blue zone where they have high achievement. They're performing well in the categories proficient and advanced, but they also are demonstrating high growth, so above 60% growth. So ideally, we'd really like to see everybody above the red line and truly ideally in the blue. So when we look at results by grade, ELA, all of the grades had moderate growth and higher achievement. They're not quite in that blue zone because it's only moderate growth, and that's the yellow block there. But we're above the red line, and we're in moderate growth, so that's pretty good. When we take a look at math, grades 5 through 8 and 10 show moderate growth and higher achievement. Again, we're in that yellow zone. Grade 4 had higher growth and higher achievement, which puts them in the blue zone, but really just slightly into the blue zone. We're not way out into the blue zone, but we're glad to be in the blue zone. When we take a look by school, ELA, all schools showed moderate growth and higher achievement, so again, we're in that yellow zone. For math, the West demonstrated higher growth and higher achievement, which is the blue zone, but again, just slightly into the blue zone. The North, the middle school, and the high school showed moderate growth and higher achievement, which again is in that yellow zone. You'll notice that there's no mention of the Shawshene or the Woburn Street, and that's because growth is not calculated for those students in grade 3. Grade 3 is actually the baseline to determine growth when they take the assessment in grade 4. When we take a look at the results by student groups, we compare our non-high needs students with our high needs students. We see that the non-high needs students score in that moderate growth, higher achievement in both ELA and math, so they're in the yellow zone. But when we take a look at the high need students, which could be students in students with disabilities, low income students, our ELL students, they would all be in that high needs grouping. We can see that they have moderate growth and lower achievement in both ELA and math, and that puts them in that green zone, and that's below that 50% line, that red line. So that's clearly something that needs to be focused for work. So now we'll shift to that third category, talking about PPI. That's that Progress and Performance Index. Another special code word, CPI. Those are the points that are assigned for every student based on their performance, based on growth. We also can earn CPI bonus points for moving students out of warning and moving students into advanced. There's an annual CPI number and a cumulative, and that all factors into our PPI, which gives us our accountability level, and we are currently at a level 2 because we do have schools in district that are level 2. The goal here is that gap halving. When the state submitted a waiver for No Child Left Behind, and the waiver was approved, we moved away from the expectation that all students would be scoring proficient by 2014 to taking a look at where we were in 2011, and over a 6-year period of time, by 2017, our goal is to, as for every district across the state, is to cut that achievement gap in half. So based on where we were in 2011, we were supposed to cut that gap in half over those 6 years. We're halfway through that 6-year window now. The targets are identified by the state, and it's based on taking that difference where we were in 2011 and where we need to be by 2017 and figuring out, putting us on a trajectory and figuring out, okay, what is the benchmark point we need to hit annually to get to that end point in 2017. So we take a look now at the district picture, and we are, as I said, level 2. And on this particular chart, you can see that we have information relative to gap narrowing and growth, as well as those extra credit points that we get for moving students out of warning or more students into advanced. Where you see green, green is good. Where you see yellow, not good, but not bad. We're below target, so we didn't hit that annual target that we need to hit. As a district, the picture is not too bleak. It's very doable. And then we'll take a look school by school. Woburn Street, ELA and math on target for ELA and above target for math. So we exceeded the target, which is always good. And we got bonus points. Those are good too. Shawsheen, we saw no change, so basically a flat performance in ELA and in math for all students. And when we take a look at the subgroups, that high needs category, we actually saw a decline with the high needs group in ELA. And we did see with the math, that high needs group, they did show improvement, but below target. But we did get extra credit points for moving students into advanced. The North, again, you can see with that yellow, we improved, but we did not hit the target for any of the subjects listed. ELA, math, science, all students, the high need subgroup. However, we did show growth on target for ELA and math for all of our students, and our high need students in math actually showed growth above target, which is great news. And then we see lots of extra credit points for moving students into advanced. The West, when we take a look at the gap narrowing, ELA, math, and science, largely improved but below target, with the exception of math for the high needs subgroup. They actually showed decline. Growth, we can see that we're either on target or above target, with the exception of math with that high needs group who are below target. And we also did see some extra credit points for moving students out of warning and into advanced. At the middle school, you can see that largely we're unchanged. We did show some improvement with ELA for all students, but we didn't hit that target. We did reach our target, however, for science, both for all students and the high needs group. And we did hit our targets in ELA for growth for both all students and the high needs subgroup. We fell below target, however, for both of those groups in math. And we did see some extra credit points for moving students out of warning or into advanced. And then we take a look at the high school, largely green, which is very good. The one place that we didn't hit either on or above target was with our high needs group in science. And again, you can see extra credit points for moving students out of warning and into advanced. Last year when I presented this information to you, I showed you this graphic. The district has a very consistent, steady performance in terms of students reaching advanced, proficient, needs improvement, warning. Largely, if you take a look at those graphs that are in your full report, the performance is pretty steady over the last 4 years. We're not seeing large fluctuations, good or bad. And some might say steady performance, that's good. But the problem is that the targets are climbing. So every year that we have a steady performance, the gap is actually getting bigger. And I can show you specifically what we're talking about. If you take a look at ELA, the left side is all students. If you take a look at the line that you can see above, that pale blue line, that's where we should be. Those are the targets that we're supposed to be hitting every year. And the green line below it, that's where we're actually performing every year. So we are not closing our gap. We're not hitting those annual targets. When you take a look on the right side of the screen, that's your high need subgroup, and you can see their trajectory in that blue line, and that green line is where they're actually performing. And the reason that the green lines are shorter is that that's projected out through the end of that 6-year window. We don't have the data yet for those. We still have time to make up the gap. Similar when you take a look at math. That top line is the line with our trajectory where we need to be by 2017, and the green line is our actual performance. So, in summary, when we look at ELA, we saw some small gains at all schools. All grades were showing moderate growth and high achievement, and all schools were demonstrating moderate growth and high achievement. Math, we saw some solid gains in grade 3 and 5. Grade 4 overall has the lowest percentage of proficient and advanced in the district, so we're looking at that. The Woburn Street School saw an increase of 22% in proficient and advanced, and in that 22%, 19% of those, that was an increase of 19% in advanced. And we also saw an 8% decrease in warning at the Woburn Street, which is why the Woburn Street was notified last Friday that they are a Massachusetts commendation school for 2014 because of the strong growth that they demonstrated. The West, grade 5, showed a 7% increase in proficient and advanced. The high school, we saw a 4% decrease in warning, so that's good. The middle school, grade 7, we saw a market decline, a 17% decrease. However, I would offer this for consideration. This particular group was the first group to transition to the new Common Core. They did not come up through the grades with the Common Core standards. So this is not unusual to see this particular cohort of students across the state performing less than you might expect. And then we see other grades in schools, the performance was largely unchanged. Grades 5 through 8 and 10 showed moderate growth and high achievement in the math. Grade 4, higher growth and higher achievement. West, high growth and higher achievement. And the other schools showed moderate growth and higher achievement. Science, we saw a solid 1-year gain. Grade 8 saw a 9% increase in proficient and advanced, and at the same time saw a 6% decrease in warning. That was, we believe, largely based on the fact that for the first time, the teachers were taking a look at the data and using that data to inform their instruction. Grade 5, we also saw a 10% increase in proficient and advanced. These are all solid gains. So we're quite happy we're going in the right direction there. Again, taking a look at the subgroups, the non-high needs outperforms the high needs. The problem is that when we take a look at the data, in many cases, we're seeing that they outperform by double or more. Mm-hmm. And that is a significant problem that we need to take a close look at. The non-high needs, again, showed moderate growth and higher achievement in ELA and math, and the high needs students, moderate growth and lower achievement in ELA and math. And we can get more concrete as we talk about that gap between the non-high need students and the high need students. The high need students are significantly, you can see the percentages there. Percentage of proficient and advanced in ELA is 47%, yet the non-high need students, 88%. The non-high need students have 0% in warning or failing, yet the high needs group has 19% in warning and failing. Math, similar situation. The non-high needs group, 78% combined proficient and advanced, while the high needs group is only at 33% proficient and advanced. And we have 31% of the high needs group scoring warning or failing in math, compared to only 2% of the non-high needs group. Again, a summary of the results by standard. We take a look at the data by the curriculum standards. The district performed at or above the state in all standards, all grades, ELA, and math. When we take a look at science, we see that the all students group struggle with standards related to energy, and that's in grade 5, grade 8, and grade 10. ELA, the high needs students, we see are struggling with open response questions compared to, let's say, multiple choice questions or short answer questions, vocabulary, and the reading anchor standard. Math, the high needs students, grades 3 through 8, struggle with all question types. They struggle with algebraic thinking, fractions, and statistics. The math high needs students in grade 10 struggle with transformations, equations, and functions. So to kind of wrap it up, the annual CPI targets for the all students group is not being reached by all schools with the exception of the high school. The subgroups are not meeting yearly CPI targets. We are not currently on track to meet the district target in 2017 if the current level of performance and growth continues. The West High Needs subgroup is below the target in math by 19.4 CPI points. That is a significant gap. The West Special Ed subgroup and the special ed students would be also part of that high needs group. But when you take a look and you break out the high needs group, it's the special ed subgroup at the West that's 18.1 CPI points below the target in math. That's a lot of ground to make up and move forward to hit the target for next year. That's the ground we need to make up. The middle school special ed subgroup is only 9.7 CPI points below the target in ELA. Shawsheen High Needs subgroup is 11.2 CPI points below target in ELA. The district, at the district level, our Hispanic Latino subgroup is 10.3 CPI points below target in math. But we are getting extra credit points in CPI for moving students into advanced and morning across the board. So what are we going to do now that we know our data story? Similar to last year, our district improvement plan and our district improvement goals are going to be connected to school improvement goals, and those are going to be informed by the data that we've been taking a look at. We are seeing through the ed-eval process that school goals are being aligned with district goals and teacher goals are being aligned with school goals. So we're all focusing in the same direction to make gains. We are going to continue with an in-depth examination of the 2014 MCAS data as well as our in-district assessment data. We do have structures in place to support all that work. We have data teams in the buildings. We have vertical teams, lots of vertical teams actually. We've seen the number of vertical teams increase over the last 2 years. We have an ELL vertical team, an ELA vertical team, math, science, and this year, first time, we have a special ed vertical team. We also are looking at the professional development needs to support the improvement goals, and those professional development opportunities will be outlined in the district professional development plan that will be included on the agenda the same meeting that you receive the district improvement plan and the school improvement plans. We're very excited to begin working towards implementing instructional rounds. And we begin actually this month with a visit over to the Boutwell School. In addition, curriculum walks will continue. Last year, our elementary math specialist conducted curriculum learning walks with the principals visiting classrooms during math instruction blocks to look at how the new Common Core curriculum was being implemented and having conversations. That was largely to help our principals grow as instructional leaders with this new curriculum. And one of the things that we're already doing is finding opportunities within the school day to free up time for teachers to co-plan. That is going to be a significant action as we look to make gains moving forward to hit our target in 2017. And parents who want to know more about growth percentile, there is a link on the district website so that people can go and take a look and learn more about that and how it's calculated. And that's it.
Thank you, Kate. Question?
Yep, I just wanted to thank you again for putting together such a concise report, to put it in layman's terms for everyone to understand. But I also feel the need to really thank the staff and administration in the schools. Last year was a very difficult time with putting together, MCAS is a very high-stress time to begin with, but to have to be impacted by a pilot on top of it that made it that much more stressful. I really have to commend the leadership and the hard work by the staff and commend the students for such success in pushing through it all. So kudos to all those involved.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Mrs. Carroll?
So the difference between the Shawsheen and the Woburn Street is it was special needs. Is there? I know there's probably a little bit more special needs at the Shawsheen in the west than the Woburn Street in the north, right?
We're taking a close look at that.
Right.
In its own right. The new special ed vertical team is really diving deep into the data on that subgroup and what sorts of things might be at play that we can target to close that gap. But I think it's maybe more likely due to the fact that last year the Woburn Street really focused on their math goal as their highest priority goal, whereas the Shawsheen focused on their ELA goal as their highest priority goal. So that really might be more of an explanation for that bit of a difference at this point. Keep in mind that teachers would have also had goals connected to the priority goal in the building. So when you have all sorts of people really focused on math or really focused on ELA, that's likely where you're going to see some movement and maybe not so much in the other areas. And the more teachers or teacher teams you have setting goals that focus, let's say, on math, the greater likelihood that you're going to see gains.
Right. Okay. And just to piggyback on that, and the work of this special ed vertical team is it's fantastic that this has been put together, and I had the opportunity to sit in on that meeting that was sort of co-facilitated by Dr. Burnham, as well as I should recognize our data and assessment specialist, Jen White, who's with us today too, and thank her for the immense amount of work that she does in pulling a lot of this data together and leading us through this journey to really help us understand our data and how they connect to the instruction that's being delivered. And Mary Hood is also facilitating that. And just to build on that example of Woburn Street and Shawsheen, what we saw specifically was that through evaluating the data and actually looking at how were students performing in the various standards, the staff at the Woburn Street identified, for example, that fractions was an area of weakness. This would have been going into this past year. And so they developed their goals really around how can we better instruct students and help them understand fractions. That was a very clear goal. And when you looked at the data, really broken down, disaggregated to see how did the students at Shawsheen do, the high-need students on that particular standard around fractions versus Reuben Street, there was a significant difference. That was an area where they were really able to leverage that goal and that strategy to get the gains that they got in math. The advantage to knowing that and really looking in the data is that Shawshene can now turn to its colleagues at the Reuben Street School and say, what worked, and implement some of those strategies to hopefully be able to get similar gains for that population. It was actually not even just the high needs. It was across both high needs and non-high needs, where Reuben Street saw those pretty significant gains in that particular area that they recognized a weakness in the prior year.
Well, I guess that's why I'm saying, sorry, was because I think Shawshene in the West has more special needs, like they have the medical room, I mean, I know for, and then the Reuben Street does not. So I think there's a little bit more special needs and more of disabilities at Shawshene in the West than they would be at the other side of the town.
And I'll just interject here. Some of those students would actually have been on the ALT assessment, and those scores aren't factored into some of the data that we see for performance or growth. It does factor in when we get to the CPI points and the PPI overall, but so some of those students actually are kind of taken out of the equation, if you will, when we're taking a look at some of this data.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I've seen my daughters and what the teachers have done for the MCAS, and it's unbelievable. They have pitches, they have to have such in debt on everything, and I mean, I tell the teachers this every year, thank you. Oh my God, I can't believe the work you've put into it. So it's not, it's a lot of work.
I think your point, though, is a valid one in that when you take that to the next step, it's really important for us to look at what specifically the students' challenges are, and what is their disability or whatever challenge it is, and to really look specifically and to look at those students in both schools across the district. We see similar things happening at the West, being able to really identify, based on the challenge, what is the instructional strategy that could work for this group of students. So I think some of those strategies are still valid regardless of the disability, but then there is that extra measure of examination of data that really looks at, okay, is there something specific going on for a particular group, even more of a subgroup of students.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you for putting this together. There's an amazing amount of information on here. My question.
We didn't even share everything.
Right.
What are you holding back?
Come to the
What are you holding?
SPED Vertical Team meeting, and we'll show you more data.
So this is a lot of good data for us to have. My question is, you put up a graph that shows our performance has been pretty steady and I guess slightly improved from last year as well. However, the gap between our performance and the target seems to be getting bigger because the target keeps increasing. So I guess what level of improvement do we need to have to catch up to the target, and is it realistic, to catch up to that target? What level do we need to be at? Because seeing that we had a slight improvement, that gap is just getting bigger and bigger. So that improvement just needs to be dramatic, I guess, to catch up over time.
Not necessarily. So we have annual targets for the next 3 years to close that gap. And if there's a significant gap already that we need to make up in addition to moving forward to hit next year's target, you could take a look at, okay, we have 3 years, though, before we have to hit that target in 2017. So we could try to target our growth and make up little bits over the 3 years rather than try to make up the entire gap and then hit the target for next year. It's likely not going to happen for everybody in 1 year's time, but the good news is we have 3. How realistic is it? I think based on the nature of the work that we're doing with data and the fact that teachers are, the energy around developing goals this year as compared to last year, our first year with the new evaluation system, there's actually some excitement amongst the teachers and the goals that they're setting. And they're working diligently to to make those gains. There's lots of really good conversation going on, and, you know, something as simple as starting the special ed vertical team to dive deep into the data to figure out what correlations we might be finding, as the superintendent indicated, what strategies are working for students with specific kinds of disabilities so that we can replicate those strategies for all students with that disability. We have not taken a look at that data as deeply as we are this year. And that is the group that really, if we focus on and work really hard, we really feel that we can make gains.
Thank you.
And just to go off that, because historically, the high needs group have always performed with, and, you know, as compared to the non-high needs group, by over double. And that's always been a bone of contention, not only for our district, but I think districts across the state. And seeing where this year's results of the standards with the high needs students, you know, in open response vocabulary, a lot of that plays into critical thinking skills and comprehension, which the disability specifically is about. And so I kind of think, and I'm not getting on a podium here, but kind of think it's partially that disability and a test that may not be as accommodating to really pull out what those type of students know, right. You know, and I think that may be in play, but it's still, and I certainly agree with you. I think if you target that group, the special education students, the ELL students, the low-income students, I think if you boost that subgroup up, those gains that we're looking for, that we need to make towards our targets, will, because the scores are all aggregated, we'll get them quite close to, and maybe even possibly reach them.
Well, you saw in a couple of places that we actually scored above target.
Yep.
That can happen too. And if we get a little more above target, then that's great. You know, I can't sit here and guarantee that we're going to close that gap, but I really do believe that we have the possibility that we will do it, because we are working hard and deliberate. There's intention with the work that we do every day through the collaboration with the teachers during common planning time, looking at data, talking about data, using that data to redesign teaching strategies to reach students that they weren't able to reach. It's a process, but teachers and administrators, for that matter, are really diving into this work. We had 4 days of a data institute in August. We spent 2 days with administrators looking at ELA data and 2 days looking at the math data, and it was really fantastic. I think that because they were working together as a group, I think they were able to see more things in their school data than they would have seen had they been working independently looking at their school data. And many of them, things seemed to become really crystal clear, and they were really focused on what they needed to set their school improvement goals around this year. And I get the sense that many of them are really excited to do this work, and teachers are excited as well.
I was just going to say, I think that you're going to find, which is exciting too, that when we come and present to you, and our administrators come and present to you on November 12th, their school improvement plan, you're going to see that their goals, just like their own administrator goals, and you'll see it a bit in my goals as well, you're going to remember this presentation, and you're going to say, oh, that's why they have that goal. That's actually specifically addressed. And it's really, some of these goals are fantastically specific. And Mr. Shaw at the West, I'll give you an example in terms of some of the things you saw about the CPI gap, is really looked at how the performance of high needs and special education students in that school to figure out where are they struggling. And he noticed some pretty remarkable things about students not responding to the open response questions and starting to think about what's happening there. Is it comprehension? Is it grit? What is going on, and focusing his goals specifically on that population, because there's a belief that that really could be the highest leverage strategy. We don't have tons of time here, so we've got to be strategic about the things we focus on to try and get those gains. And I was really excited going around the district on the CIT day on September 26th, because teachers spent a good amount of the time doing this work together. And to see them and administrators running around getting them data because they were asking for, well, can you generate this report? So because I have this theory or this hypothesis, I want to test it. It really is, now that they understand how to use it, some really fantastic things are going on. So, kudos to the groundwork that was laid by my predecessor to put the data assessment specialists in place, and for the teamwork with Dr. Burnham and Jen to really help people and make them feel comfortable with doing this work, because it certainly is not something that has been part of people's training coming up through the ranks. I did want to hand out something, if I could, as well, because you reminded me that I had sort of generated this information. So I just wanted to share with you, I'll pass this along. I was curious myself about, you had mentioned other districts and other district struggles. Mm-hmm. So I was curious myself, how do we compare in Wilmington to other districts? And the first question folks will often ask themselves is, well, how do we pick which districts we compare ourselves to? So I will tell you that there are 43 communities listed on this. There are three different sorts of the data, but the same 43 communities here. And I picked the communities in a couple ways. First of all, the DESE chooses a list of comparable communities that's based on student demographics. So similar size district, similar percentage of special education students, high need students, low income students, et cetera. The other communities I chose based on financial comparability, looking at the total size of their budget, looking at the size of the community, what was their ability to pay in terms of their per capita income, what is their wealth level, and what is the percentage of the total budget in these communities that's spent on education. So they're making a similar type of investment as Wilmington Public Schools are in their education. And what I did was rank them here, so you can see the first sort is the district sorted by PPI for all students. And you can see that on that sort, Wilmington ranks 28 out of 43 out of those communities. When you sort it based on high needs, the high needs PPI, we rank 35 out of 43. So we certainly have some gains. I also calculated the gap between the all students and high needs students. And obviously, the smaller the gap, the better it is, the better performance it is. And I did that, and I highlighted some communities because the reason for doing this type of analysis is that it affords us the opportunity to say, let's reach out to some of these communities where they have high PPI, so they're meeting their targets, and they also have a low gap. So communities like Walpole, Canton, North Reading, Linfield, Shrewsbury, North Andover, some near us, some not near us, reach out to those communities and ask the question, what are you doing that we could be doing, or can we see how you're dealing with a certain population? So I think this is helpful information to say, absolutely, even with the financial investments we're making and the type of students we have room to grow. We have gains to be made. We're not at the bottom of the list. We're not at the top of the list, but we have some benchmarks here for where we can think about heading as a district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pion?
Yeah, I understand this is 1 year's worth of data, and I didn't see last year, so this may not be a trend, but I found it curious that the Woburn Street seems to be outperforming the Shawshene, and they feed the students into the north, whereas the west seems to be outperforming the north. Is there any reason that you guys have discovered for that, or is it just a 1 year thing?
No. But they run pretty close. I would say that the performance gap this year is a little bit more pronounced than it has been in the past. But overall, Woburn Street is slightly usually ahead in percentage, in terms of proficient and advanced. But again, a couple of percentage points really isn't all that significant. When you start to see upwards of 8, 9, 10% or more, that's a big gap.
But does the West generally outperform the North?
Historically, yep. Again, not by a large margin. We did see a pretty strong gain this year in the 5th grade math at the West. So again, that kind of bumps the West a little bit more than it might have in previous years. But in general, slightly, the West does outperform the North.
Just we'll have one more quick one. What are the consequences if we don't achieve our goals by 2017?
Excellent question. The answer is we don't know. The state has not pronounced anything about the consequences for that. And we actually talked about what happens if we don't meet the target in 2017 when we were together at the Data Institute this August. And we're not being driven in this work by fear of the consequence in 3 years. The thing that is driving us in this work is a sense of a moral imperative. There's a significant gap in the performance of our special ed subgroup or our high needs subgroup as compared to the non-high needs subgroup. That is not acceptable. We can do better than that, and we will. And that's what's driving the work.
Thank you.
We'll worry about the consequences later.
Can
Did someone else have?
I? I know that in the years, past 2 years anyway, that there has been a gap between the 3rd grade at Woburn Street and the 4th grade, and I know that was something they were going to try to target and tease out, because it was kind of a consistent kind of drop, and not knowing why that is, and why 4th grade wasn't as consistent with their scores. Is that still kind of on the radar?
It absolutely is.
Okay.
And one of the things that we've been talking about, typically every year, the May CIT Day is dedicated to transition planning for all grades, moving 1st grade to 2nd grade and so on. But we are going to be more strategic this year, that day being one of the ways that we can address it. We are looking at the data. But we're going to use some of the CIT time to have conversations between 3rd grade and 4th grade teachers to go over the data so that they can know those students coming in. Okay. We think, although we can't say for certain, that we feel that the transition from 3rd grade, leaving one building and going to a new building, might be a factor in that dip that we see for 4th grade. We also think that it might be a factor for the performance for the 6th grade, moving from an intermediate school to the middle school. These are things that we're going to look much more deeply at, and see if we can't come up with some strategies to investigate and explore to see if we can tease out what might actually be happening there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that? Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is old business, and we have the background check policy. So this is the second reading, and hopefully the adoption of this policy. So does anybody have questions about it or comments on this policy before we vote? No?
I'm ready.
Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt the revised background check policy?
I'll move to adopt the revised background checks policy.
A second? Mrs. Burns? All in favor? Unanimous? Okay. And then, so the next item is new business, and we have the superintendent's 2014-2015 goals.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the side a bit here as we bring this up. Make sure I have. So I wanted to just start out by letting folks know, and you recall that there was a subcommittee formed, and Mrs. Broussard chairs that superintendent evaluation subcommittee, and she's joined by Mr. Bjork and Mrs. Kane on that subcommittee. And we met a few weeks ago at this point. I don't remember the exact date. We met as a group so that I could present to that group the draft goals, and got some great feedback and have made some revisions to those goals in the interim, and so I present to you sort of the draft final goals for your review and approval tonight. I think you have these in your packet too. Maybe look a little bit different. Yeah, sure. Okay. The first goal that I have relates to leadership development, and more specifically to my development as a leader. I'm new here, obviously, to Wilmington Public Schools, but also new to the superintendency position. So I'm fortunate that you, as a school committee, have endorsed my participation in the new superintendent's induction program. And so this goal relates specifically to my participation, my professional practice, the development of my leadership capacity by participating in that program. It addresses things like strategy development, it addresses data analysis, instructional leadership, developing the relationship between the school committee and the superintendent. And so this goal specifically addresses my attendance at the 8 full-day contact sessions, of which we've actually had 3 already. We have assignments that we do, readings that we do as part of this, and my entry plan was probably the first major assignment that we were tasked with, and you were all a part of the development and review of that. In addition, I also spend time in consultation with the coach that I was assigned to, and you all know Dr. McGrath, who's actually here with us today. And we spend a significant amount of time together, not just at the contact days, but she has been here to provide me feedback during school committee meetings, during my leadership team meetings, and we've actually had the opportunity to visit a school, which we'll continue to do. And she observes that process as I'm observing our administrators in my role as their supervisor and evaluator in the district. So that is goal 1 in terms of leadership development. The second goal, and this shouldn't really come as a huge surprise in light of the presentation that you just saw, this is my student learning goal. And if you remember when Mrs. Presser was here and kind of talked about the superintendent evaluation process, she talked about having a professional practice goal, a student improvement goal, and in general 2 district improvement goals, although you will see that I have a 3rd district improvement goal. So this is my student learning goal, and this goal is around closing the gap, closing the achievement gap that we have here in Wilmington Public Schools. You've heard a lot of that background information this evening in terms of where we are and what our cumulative PPI ratings have been. And so this goal basically is about establishing the conditions for our students to be able to achieve at the highest possible level. And we definitely want to accomplish 2 things here. We want to make sure that we're supporting our struggling learners, and we've talked about the high needs subgroup. We've talked about students with disabilities. We also have low-income students and students who are English language learners. So we want to support those struggling learners, but at the same time, we also want to promote achievement and rigor, and we have schools that are focusing on both increasing the academic rigor and increasing achievement for all students, but also supporting those struggling students, making sure that they too can access over time that high level of rigor. So the measurement for this goal is PPI, and it's, again, as to Dr. Burnham's point, this is not about, we don't choose these things as goals in and of themselves. They are measurement of the goal. So we are measuring how we're doing in terms of supporting our students, our high achievers and our struggling students, and we're using this PPI as a measure of that achievement. And to Mr. Mulis's point, you had asked how are we going to close this gap. So these numbers were chosen, these measures were chosen strategically based on what can we accomplish. So we have 3 years left, if you will, to close that gap. What would it take for us to get there? So I'm choosing a PPI measure because it incorporates not just achievement, but as we learned from the presentation, it incorporates achievement, it incorporates growth, and it incorporates also some extra support, some extra credit points, they call it, for shifting kids into advanced and shifting students out of warning and into the proficient categories. So it's a complex measure, and it also allows the administrators' goals and the school improvement goals and the educator goals to really feed in and tie. So if everybody is able to accomplish the goals that they're setting, these are benchmarks that we should be able to hit. So we're setting a little bit of a stretch goal, but we've identified very specifically what areas and what measurements we would need to move and by how much to be able to achieve this level of performance for next year. So some of the activities that I plan to engage in is to provide that assistance and training to our administrators in determining the student achievement and growth targets that they would have to hit for us to be able to demonstrate this improvement in student outcomes that we would need to achieve. We would be looking to support administrators in working with their teachers to develop the student achievement goals and to identify the student learning gaps. It's the type of work that we're doing now with, as Dr. Burnham mentioned, with data teams and with vertical teams to really target what are the standards and the skills where students are not quite getting it, and how do we make sure that we're targeting the instruction so that they can learn those skills and learn those standards. We're looking to identify professional development opportunities for professional staff to really help them even better understand how to utilize data to identify where students are struggling, link those gaps to the standards and the skills, and to be able to learn about the different instructional strategies that they would need to learn to be able to develop effective interventions for those students who are struggling. And finally, providing assistance and resources to ensure that from a curriculum side, that we make sure that our curriculum is aligned to the standards, and that teachers really have the tools and resources, including pacing guides and scope and sequence, and make sure that they really understand on a day-to-day basis what it is that they are delivering for instruction, and that we give them the time and the resources to come up with solid lesson plans, solid design units, design good assessments to test if kids are really learning what it is that we're wanting them to learn. So a lot of activity there, and this is really about our team, our leadership team, myself, Dr. Burnham, Ms. White, that we're all supporting and providing that assistance to our administrators and our staff to be able to continue to do the work that they've really already started to do. In terms of the next goal, this is the District Improvement Goal 1, and this is a strategic planning goal specifically targeted at the entry plan. And you all know, and you're very aware because you approved the entry plan, that I've developed this entry plan, and this goal is simply around making sure that I complete that process and be able to really identify the critical needs that we have as a district, and to use that information to sort of set the goals and to revise, refine the district strategic plan that will carry us through the next several years of our work together to try and, again, improve student outcomes here in the district. And another strategic goal we have here is around developing learning leaders. And by learning leaders, what we're talking about is essentially that our administrators are really not just instructional leaders, it's not just about the instruction per se, but it's also about asking the question and shifting the culture. You're not evaluating just what it is that teachers are teaching. You're evaluating, are students learning what we want them to learn? That's really, and if they're not learning what we want them to learn, what do we need to do about it to make sure? So really empowering our administrators to understand how to be the learning leaders in their buildings and supporting them. Dr. Burnham mentioned in her last slide some of the things that we're doing. One of them is instructional rounds. And this is an opportunity for all of us as an administrative leadership team to get into classrooms and to really ask ourselves those questions. How do we know that students, what is it that we want students to learn? How do we know when we see it, and when we don't see it, what are we doing about it? What type of feedback are we giving teachers? And to become more skilled at that skill of observation and evaluation and giving feedback to teachers so that they can understand how to refine their practice to help students. So I think that's a really great practice that we'll be engaged in. We start actually this Friday with our first visit at one of our schools to implement this instructional round model. We also want to provide professional development to the leadership team on how to facilitate meetings. We hear a lot that one of the biggest challenges that our instructional staff have are they don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to do this. So before we come and ask you as a school committee or the community to give us more time, time is a resource, and resource has a cost to it. We want to make sure that we're using whatever time we have available to us right now as effectively as possible. And that includes, for example, staff meeting time. So instead of using staff meeting time to sort of report out to staff, finding other ways to do the reporting out and allowing those staff meetings, they have one a month, so that's 60 minutes a month, that's 600 minutes over the course of a school year. How can they use that time to promote collaboration amongst teachers and really allow them to do the work to learn from each other during that staff meeting time, as opposed to sort of maybe just talking and saying, we need to do this, or have it be less task-oriented and more collaboration-oriented. And there's a lot of tools, and not all of us are born to be effective facilitators. We learn this skill, and so helping them and to grow and develop as facilitators of meetings and learning through coaching and training and modeling. We also want to provide time and coaching to the leadership team to help them understand the standards as well. The curriculum frameworks have been in place for a few years. While we may understand standards at one level, the more that you expose yourself to those standards and skills, you understand it at a deeper and deeper level, and then you can help teachers understand, and an administrator can be a more effective evaluator and observer in the classroom if they really understand the standards and can see how the instruction is connecting to what it is that students are supposed to be learning as part of the curriculum frameworks and standards. And finally, I think that's it, to also work with the leadership team around how they create schedules, how they look at scheduling in their building. We've had some very innovative practices begin to develop around something that's called win time, what I need time, and principals are getting very skilled at trying to figure out how to shift schedules to create time to deliver very specific targeted interventions to those students who might be struggling. And it requires a lot of thought. Scheduling is a very complicated thing, especially as you get into the secondary level, and so really focusing on how we're using the schedule to be able to maximize that intervention time with students wherever possible. The final goal is around enhancing district operations. And it's important that we all understand you are the governing body, and part of your governance, an important part of what you do, is basically establishing policy. What we want to make sure is that we review the current school committee policy manual. I know that there's already been some policies that the subcommittee has reviewed, but that we make sure that everything that's supposed to be in your policy manual, everything that you want in your policy manual to address how you would like to see this district governed, that's all been reviewed, revised, and that it's a current document. Once we've established that we have all the current policies in place, the next step is to make sure that the procedures that are necessary to implement those policies are also in place. So do we have financial procedures in place, and do they align to your policies? Do we have, we've just hired a new human resources administrator. We're very excited about that, and she will begin on the 14th of October. But allowing that person to reflect on the HR and personnel policies that are included in your policy manual and develop procedures that link to those policies as well, so we make sure that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis aligns to the policies you've established. So that's the big picture for the professional practice, student learning, and 3 district improvement goals. You see in there that the plan includes not just the goal statement and the actions, but also the benchmarks and the evidence that I will collect as we go through this process. As part of the evaluation process, I will come back to you in mid-cycle and do the formative assessment, so that's where I will present to you sort of what evidence I've collected, where I am along the timelines, where I've met benchmarks, where I might have tweaked or revised goals accordingly, and those discussions will happen probably in January, February timeframe. And at the end of the process, I will provide you with a comprehensive report on that will show you all the different evidence that I've collected and establish where I have met goals, where I've made progress, where I've made significant progress, and allow you to really review from the evidence and the benchmarks what kind of progress was made on those goals. So that's the big picture of the process as we'll move forward.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Mrs. Burns?
I had a general question that it just kind of triggered when you were going over the closing the gap, and something that we hadn't discussed, and forgive me if we're backtracking, but with regards to closing the gap, what type of attention is being made to those high achieve students? I see that even in the advanced scoring of our MCAS, there still is a large room for them to continue to also make gains. How are we looking at that with regards to making sure that whether it be the courses, or classes, or curriculum that we're offering meets their level of challenge?
Sure. When you hear particularly the school improvement plan and goals from particularly the middle school and the high school, both of those principles are focused a lot on rigor and evaluating and observing rigor in the classroom. And rigor to some is, what do we mean by rigor? And these principles are actually putting things in place right now, practices in place that will help the team, the instructional staff at the buildings, define that as a team. What do we mean by instructional rigor? Academic rigor. They're talking about developing a rubric that shows these are the behaviors that happen in a classroom where there's rigorous instruction going on, where kids are being challenged appropriately. This is what you would expect to see. And so they're developing those indicators for themselves so that they can then use that as a measurement tool to identify academic rigor. They're doing student surveys to try to understand what it is that students are looking for and to understand students' thoughts around our classes challenging. It's helpful that we also are implementing as part of educator evaluation, there is a student feedback piece to it as well. And I think a lot of teachers do that anyway, but they're able perhaps to use this goal of academic rigor to structure their own feedback instruments that they will use to collect information from students as to whether or not students are being appropriately challenged. So that's a goal. You will see, too, that even at the other schools, at the intermediate and elementary levels, that principals, yes, they're focusing on struggling learners because they know that they need to support them and make sure that, but they also have incorporated goals around making sure that they're continuing to push, if you will, or support kids in moving from proficient into advanced. It's helpful that the state also recognizes that in our accountability ratings, because you do get sort of extra credit points when you move students from proficient into advanced. So it's nice that they recognize that if you're making gains for those high achievers, you're getting some credit for that work as well.
Which is fabulous. It's just making sure that those who typically score in advance continue to get that attention to build upon and meet their own individualized potentials as well, because that's another kind of quiet subgroup that doesn't always get recognized because of their high achievements, but still, I think, that they shouldn't be lost.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would want to see that those students had not just high achievement, but high growth as well.
I guess I personally struggle with, if they're already high achievers, yet they're expected to grow, well, how far are they going to grow? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
That gap is pretty big, so I assume
well,
there may be...
yeah, there must be some room for growth there,
Right.
but when we talk about we really wanted to be in that blue score, well, you've got that small group that maybe's pretty high, and there's not much more room for them to grow as far as the tests are concerned, so how do you make sure that they keep going up?
That's it. Yeah, I think that's the...
And I think there's other measures, too. Clearly, we want to look at, we offer advanced placement courses. So what is our subscription? How many students are enrolled in those AP classes? How many AP classes are we offering, and how are the students doing when they're taking those AP exams, if they are, and hopefully they are taking those AP exams. Even SATs are measures. So there are other measures, I think, that we can bring to bear once we see students are really achieving at high levels and there's not a lot of room for growth. Well, we should see that in other ways. We should see high performance in other measures as well. Even something as simple as what types of colleges and universities are our students able to be accepted to, whether or not they choose to go there, but what are they, reaching for in terms of that post-secondary education experience.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the superintendent's goals for the 2014-2015 school year? Mr. Miller.
Make a motion to approve the superintendent's 2014-2015 goals.
Can I have a second? Sorry. All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is we have 4 policies, and they're the first reading of each of them. So we don't do motions, but we take questions if there are questions on these.
I can offer for just some background, the student discipline, student conduct, student absences, those policies came about as a recent change. I think you're all aware of the Chapter 222 around student discipline and student attendance. So those policies are being revised to ensure that your policies are consistent with that new law. And the bullying prevention, this policy, I believe, was probably discussed in times because it looks like the handbooks are reflective of some changes that were made to the bullying prevention law, but also adds some language in there as a result of, again, another regulatory change that occurred in this past year.
Okay, so then we'll just reconnect it. Okay, so public comment? Nope. Other reports? Ms. Broussard?
2 quick things on subcommittees. Our Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee will be meeting again on Tuesday, October 14th at 1:30 at the Roman House to discuss our next steps now that we've approved Superintendent Delai's goals. And also I was going to advertise that WEF is meeting next on Tuesday, October 14th at 7 at the middle school library. And we are going to have a little bit of a social time at 6:30, maybe a little food and drink there to share with our grant recipients. And this is the night where the grant recipients share their experiences with us. So a pretty cool evening if people are able to attend. And that's all I got.
What's the date on that?
That's Tuesday, October 14th, and yes, I think
We're all invited.
everyone's invited.
I think it also should be noted, on October 15th, Wednesday at 7 o'clock here at the high school library, Division 1, school committees will be meeting here to discuss the upcoming articles before our conference. MASE conference, so that will take place at 7 o'clock next Wednesday here at the high school for Division 1 school committees.
Good. All righty. Any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay. Future meeting dates. We have October 22nd and November 12th. So, school improvement plans on the 12th.
That's correct. School improvement plans and district improvement plan on November 12th. And just as a preview, on October 22nd, Dr. Burnham will be doing a report for you on the various types of district assessment tools that we use that are sort of benchmarks to assist us in gauging where students are over the course of the year. That'll be a good follow-up to the presentation you heard today.
Okay. Then can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Broussard?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Mr. Lewis? All in favor? Okay.